Hello Toy Collector fans, Universal Toy Collector here and welcome to the channel. And welcome to another episode of My Collecting Life, the series where I get to speak to you, members of the toy collecting community, about your own personal collections, finding out what got you into collecting in the first place and what gives you that toy collecting buzz. So who is our guest on this week's episode then? Well, before I introduce him, let's take a look at some of his collection in a musical montage. Okay, so yet again, another fantastic collection, and I'm loving the Star Wars and I'm loving the G.I. Joe, especially the vintage. So it is a pleasure to welcome to the channel, Jeff Barker. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hello, how's it going?
All good. Just want to firstly thank you for taking the time out to do this. Really appreciate you being on the series, so thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
No. It's my pleasure, mate, to have you on. I know we've chatted briefly a couple of times before, but not to this extent. So
Yeah.
You were saying you roughly know what the episode's about, or the series is about. I've got 10 questions for you. one time, roughly about an hour or so.
Sure.
There's no real rush. If we go over, we go over. It's
Yep.
all about you, Jeff. So let's crack on then. First question.
I'm not sure.
What are your childhood memories and what toy lines were you into?
Childhood memories. So I'm a little older than a lot of people. I'm in my early 50s, and I'm 52. And so my earliest memories were, as far as toys and action figures and stuff, or action figure-ish, was Adventure People.
Okay.
And Fisher-Price Adventure People. In fact, I still have one of my very first action figure I've ever owned. I still have over here on the shelf.
Oh, wow.
And it's an adventure person from the water skiing set. And but then, you know, a little thing when I was 7 years old happened called Star Wars, and kind of changed the trajectory of where I was going in life as far as what my interests were. And of course, that was such a huge thing. I can still remember this day laying in bed at night after seeing it for the first time, opening weekend, and just staring at the ceiling in complete awe, thinking that's the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life, you know, my short 7-year life. And it's like, I need to have everything about that. Then got into the action figures when they started coming out. My very first Star Wars figure was Chewbacca, and I bought at a local mall. And pretty much that was it for a long time with Star Wars stuff. And then a little bit later, G.I. Joe started coming around, and got really interested in that. Got interested in the comic books first. It kind of set me on a path of becoming a real big, not real big, but, you know, big fan of comics and a comic book collector. First comic book I ever bought was G.I. Joe number 15. Saw it at a local store, and it was just a block or so away from the house that had a newsstand in it that I was able to pick up some comic books and started buying those. And then happened to see some G.I. Joe stuff on the shelves that I, you know, correlated with the comic books, and was like, oh, I want to start getting those. And so I was 12 or so then, and 12, 13, and really just got into those things really heavily. Did kind of progressed out of Star Wars. Still bought a few things here and there when I could, with the folks would buy me, and then moved into G.I. Joes. And I think that's a pretty, you know, common story for a lot of people. Everyone kind of moves from one collection to another when they were kids. And so I don't think my story is anything really groundbreaking, anything like that, but it's just, you know, it's a lot of the path that everyone takes, because we're all, you know, children of that time period. And then never really got into the other ones. You know, around 84, 85, 86, I started getting out of them. Still kind of stuck with the comic books, but I got out of action figures and toys. But I stuck with the comic books because I was a big drawing person, and really effective. I mean, that's what I do for a living now, is I'm a graphic designer and a web designer and an illustrator. So I've started out doing comic book drawings, and I've kind of stuck doing that my whole life, off and on. So that's kind of the thing. So I never really got into He-Man, never got into Transformers, never got into anything after about 86 or so.
So those black containers at the side, are they full of comics?
Those are all comic books there. And then long boxes down here. There's 5 long boxes full of, each one has its own series. Like there's a Thor, Iron Man, Avengers. I was a Marvel guy, and I like Batman and some Superman stuff, mostly Batman from the DC side. But all of these are short boxes. There's probably 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's probably about 20, 25 short boxes of comics there, and those are I've had my whole life. So yeah.
That's incredible, because I spoke to Sai last week, and he said he's got like a lot of comics, and he said he had quite a few. So I'm going to ask you, how many do you reckon you have comics wise?
I've got all my comics book in an online database that is tied to a pricing engine. So that's one thing that's really nice about the comic industry. There's a lot of support applications out there for categorizing and putting into databases that then tie into pricing guides and databases and stuff. So I've got about 3,000 comics.
Jeez, that's incredible.
And I've gotten rid of a lot lately in the last 5 or 6 years, and kind of just as I'm kind of trying to do with the action figure collection, just kind of focus it to some
Yeah.
key interests and some key criterias,
Mm.
and really kind of
Awesome.
get it. So it's focused. Yeah.
So going back to 7-year-old you, at that time, do you recall what the hype was about Star Wars and the atmosphere at the theatre when you
Yeah.
went to see it? So before that, the lead up to it, the build up to it, was there much hype? Because it, people knew about it, but they weren't too sure what it was all about. I mean, what drove the hype?
So I didn't really see so much hype so much. I live in a small town in Idaho. I lived in a small town in Idaho at the time. I still live in Idaho, but I live near the Boise area now. But at the time I was living in a small town of like 2,300 people. And the town next to us, which is about 5,000 people, had a couple theaters. And yeah, there was some lines out front for it. I can specifically remember going back because I saw it 2 or 3 times in the theater, saw it opening weekend. But just the TV commercials got everyone kind of talking about it as far as, our area. But I never did see the huge lines until, of course, later on. And then I remember it coming back into theater later on that summer or winter time or Christmas time. And I do remember it being the lines were around the block for that. And then I remember sitting in the aisle watching it one time because the theater was so packed and oversold that there was no seats left. And we had to sit in the aisles to watch the movie.
That is incredible. That's incredible. Because I was, well, I'm only 4 years younger than you, Jeff. So I would have been too young to go to the theatre to watch Star Wars. I vaguely remember going to see Empire Strikes Back. So my first real experience of Star Wars was watching Return of the Jedi at the theatre. And they used to make such a big thing of it, didn't they? They, the one where we had in our local town, it was like the foyer was just full of all this Star Wars merchandise and displays and stuff like that. And it was just such. But then by then, Star Wars was a big thing.
Yeah, the merchandising.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. It does interest me though, Jeff, to find out that you weren't sort of into like Transformers and He-Man. Was there any reason for that, or were you just happy with Star Wars and Joe?
I was kind of getting out of it then when those were starting to really ramp up. I had a real aversion to the type of person, the bodybuilder types, the jock types when I was a kid. And so to me, I always kind of associated the He-Man stuff with that brain.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so I was like, I don't want a bodybuilder stuff in my, as a toy. The Transformer stuff I had a real interest in. I just never got them. My folks never bought them for me. I think they thought that they were too complicated and they would break too easy, which a lot of times they did. I had a good friend that really would have those, but I would fill my G.I. Joe stuff up into gallon buckets and get on my bike and ride a block and a half to his house. And we'd set our Joes up in the hallway in like forts, and then we'd take rubber bands and shoot them at each other. And every time we hit a Joe, he was out. And then we'd hit another, and we take turns shooting back and forth with each other, rubber bands to knock our Joes down. And so that was kind of our play thing with stuff. But yeah, I never really, I don't know why I never really got, because I love the military stuff, and then because that's what got me into Joe's also. But the Transformer things, I don't know why it really never caught on with me. And He-Man, I liked Thundercats, the cartoon, but I never really collected the toys of that stuff.
That's what I was going to say. That's one line I never have really got into, Thundercats. I kind of watched the cartoon as a kid, but I never got into that toy line. So
I was really big into some of the TV shows at the time, Buck Rogers, Battlestar Galactica, and I had some of those figures and stuff too. Also, the Mattel imports over from Japan, the Shogun Warrior stuff I really liked.
Okay.
And I still got some the little die-cast figures that are that big.
Yeah.
Love those, and still have a couple from my childhood. But yeah, it's just weird how it's funny how in the community there's kind of a cutoff as far as and like I said, you're 4 years younger, but that makes I think even that 4 or 5 year difference makes a big difference in what you're interested in.
Yeah.
You see that all the time where things are not like for people, they're in my little area group of age. I don't think those are as big as figures, but you look at people that are in their mid 40s or so, or early 40s, He-Man and Transformers were huge. And then of course, Ninja Turtles and that kind of stuff too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
It was interesting that you mentioned Buck Rogers and Battlestar Galactica. Now, I vaguely, as a kid, remember the figures, but do you know, I can't recall seeing any of those in the stores over in the UK. I mean, what were they
Yeah, I was wondering
easy to
about
come
that.
by in the States?
Yeah, we Buck Rogers was big stuff in the States, and so was Battlestar. Of course, you know, the Battlestar TV shows was only 1 year here, and
Yeah.
then Buck Rogers, I think, was like 3 or 4 years. And after the first season, they totally changed the storyline around. It kind of got weird and stuff. But you know, as a young kid, I always was a huge fan of those, and you know, especially Buck Rogers. I don't know why Buck Rogers really. Nowadays, I lean more towards Battlestar as being really cool, because I think because the effects were so Star Wars like.
Yeah.
And you know, of course, all the same designers designed the ships and that kind of stuff too, and you know, special effects houses did all the same kind of things. So it was really very much akin to the same feel as Star Wars. But Buck Rogers, of course, you know, always loved Aaron Gray and you know, all the outfits and just the storyline and all that stuff was just great.
Yeah, it was certainly a cool TV series, but like I say, you know, over in the UK at that time, I don't recall seeing any of those figures, Battlestar Galactica or Buck Rogers. So we're moving on then. So as a kid, what would you say your number one toy line was? Did that change as the years went on, or was you? Can you look back and say definitely it was this line?
Well, I mean, Star Wars was the impetus for everything for me, so that's always going to be number one. But G.I. Joe really took over, I think, for a longer period, because about the same time period actually, but it was so vast and there was so much to it as far as the toy line itself came out. You know, the amount of figures that came out and vehicles and stuff were so much more than Star Wars, that I think at that time too, it was prime playing time for me, as far as being, you know, 10, 12, 13, as I started getting into those, 14, 15, started getting into that. And I had a friend of mine who lived next door, the guy I was telling you about that I'd go play with. We were into G.I. Joe together, whereas I didn't really have anybody I was into Star Wars with. So that really helped for me to stay in it and really be a part of it. That's a tough question, because I go back and forth, because Star Wars will always be the first love, but G.I. Joe is really, you know, the bread and butter of stuff, it seems like.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people at our age would probably sort of agree with that. I mean, the scope, I mean, Star Wars was vast, but the vehicles, but I mean, with G.I. Joe, you just had like land vehicles, air vehicles, sea vehicles, you know, it was space vehicles to an extent, you know. The
accessories, the articulation. Like I said, I'm always been a big history fan and military history, and the detail of G.I. Joe stuff just spoke to me really, really, really big.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what age did you stop playing with your toys? And when did you realize you'd become a collector? Because you're saying that you got to a certain age and you sort of like petered out with the toys and stuff like that, and you went into comics. Yeah, I think probably when I was 15 or 16 is when I kind of started you know, mid high school, sophomore in high school or so. It's like, you know, oh man, you don't want to play with your toys, and you kind of hid that you're played with your toys. But I started getting into computers and electronics and you know, hanging out with friends and stuff, and just, you know, what a normal kid does through high school. I always kept so I kind of got out of those, and those all went into boxes in the closet. The comic stuff though continued, and I was still buying comics all through high school, all through the 90s. Kind of stopped in the mid 90s or so for a long time, and kind of got out of it when the big comic book boom busted, and a lot of comic shops shut down. And you know, kind of when it got so bad that the comic book storylines always had tons of crossovers, and they got just crossover crazy. If you wanted to follow a storyline, you had to buy 8 books every month to follow the storyline. It's like, I'm done. I can't do it. I was in my 20s at that point, and, you know, trying to make it, and I just couldn't afford to do that. So I'm like, I'm done. But yeah, so I stopped probably when I was 15 or 16 with the toys. They all went in the closet in the boxes, and I kept them. I did come home from college one day, and my mom had given away all my G.I. Joe stuff. But she kept all the Star Wars stuff. So most of the Star Wars collection over here that you see, over half the figures are from my childhood. Wow. But I only have 3 or 4 things from Joe's from my childhood. Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't have many Joe stuff from my childhood.
Oh, okay. Well, oh wow,
Yeah.
wow. So, blimey. So I'm guessing it was just figures you had kept over, or did you keep some vehicles as well?
For Star Wars.
No, G.I. Joe.
I think I had 2 or 3 figures left. I think I had Snow Job and Alpine, and that might have been it. But I had a Snowcat.
Okay.
And I think I had a Fang helicopter left over from when I was a kid, and that was about it.
Yeah.
And a few little things, and that was it.
Like, again with G.I. Joe, I mean, I liked playing with it as a kid. I had like the Sky Striker, then I had the Z-Force battle tank.
Yeah.
But like my friend had the majority of the toys, so I'd always, and he was about a 5-minute walk, so I went around there and was we did missions and stuff like that.
Yep.
But we didn't at that age realize that you could get a Terradrome playset. We didn't realize that you could get the USS Flag. Do you know what I mean? These weren't available to us in the UK, and
Isn't that crazy? That's crazy.
Yeah.
That trend, and I didn't know much about that transition from Action Force, Z-Force stuff. I didn't know much until just a few years ago. Started watching some of the channels out there, Tony and Analog and stuff, and really kind of got me into that. And like, wow, it really opened my eyes to, wow, there's a whole UK version of this that I knew nothing about.
But it was with the UK, it was Action Force, and with certain vehicles that we got over in the UK, we had the O-ring figures,
right? So
we had Steely with the tank, and then we had like the Commando Snake Eyes. He was the SAS Panther driver. Yep. But then I think was when Palitoy went. I think it was then Action Force went, and then it started becoming G.I. Joe in the UK.
Yep.
But now, was it? I can't remember.
I've got
to start with. Sorry, we had Action Force figures like Gung Ho and Duke and stuff like that, but they come with Action Force card backs,
right?
And then it transitioned into G.I. Joe.
And I think I've got some of the Z-Force stuff. Keith Knight has sent me a few things, and I've got them up there, and they're awesome. And I love that because but they're not the full O-ring articulation and stuff yet. They're more.
There's still some of those are the 5 POA figures, aren't they? Some of those figures,
Those are the ones those are really cool, and
I
love. I just thought going back and watching how the storyline changed to kind of merge into the Cobra G.I. Joe storyline and International Force and stuff, and the whole Action Force storyline, how that happened it's fascinating. And the comic books that go with that, I've been trying to pick up a lot of the old Action Force comic books too. Because they're great, and some of those are just amazing. Some of the same stories, not same stories as G.I. Joe, but same characters and stuff. But the stories are just awesome, and the artwork's great too. But
I was going to say, with the Action Force comics, it wasn't like the standard comics that we get now. It was more of a mini newspaper, or a magazine. It's like a newspaper sort of thing. That kind of
I've got a few of them over there, and so I need to. I love them. I love the artwork on the covers, especially.
Yeah, so because I think the storyline was that Baron Ironblood then becomes Cobra Commander.
Yeah. Yeah, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So the G.I. Joe stuff to me was always, I mean, like I said, I stopped collecting around the time. I think the last big vehicle I ever got was a Tomahawk, the twin rotored helicopter. And that was kind of the last big vehicle I ever got from my folks. And I was a huge fan of the Whale and the Sky Striker. The very first vehicle I ever got was a Dragonfly, the Cobra, not Cobra, but the attack helicopter.
Yeah.
And I never had a Terradrome, never saw one, never had a mobile command center, never saw a flag until just a few years ago, out in the wild sort of thing. And the biggest sets we had were the first command centers, which you can see right there.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, the Whale was kind of the pinnacle for everything. And then the Moray, the Cobra Moray and stuff too.
Yeah. So what age were you? Did you say you were when you started to get back into collecting? And what got you back into collecting?
So I went through a huge collecting phase when the prequels came out for Star Wars.
Okay.
I was, it's funny. A lot of people forget that there was a time period where there was nothing Star Wars out there. In the early 90s, late 80s, mid 80s, that kind of thing. After Jedi, that stuff just stopped. And then I picked up the Timothy Zahn books when that first came out. Those came out, and just voraciously read those a couple times. And then when the figures started coming out again, really got into the figures, the Star Wars figures, in the mid 90s, and to the point where I befriended the stock boys at Toys R Us and found out when stock was coming in, and show up at night and stand in line and pick up a whole case just so I could get the short case figure, and
wow,
really became a part of that. And
this was the Power of the Force line, wasn't it?
Power of the Force line, yeah.
That's it, yeah.
And thought I could. I mean, I part of me wanted to, get back into it for the nostalgia. Part of me wanted to, as a collector, for investment stuff. For better or for worse on that. And the figures themselves never spoke to me like the original stuff, because I didn't like the sculpts as much.
Oh yeah.
Just the hulky thing, the bulkiness of it. They were fine. So I chased that for a few years and then got out of it. And then I didn't really collect much for a long time. I even stopped collecting comic books for a long time in the
okay,
after the boom, after the bust happened for the first big round of comic book bust, and was out of it for a long time completely. Had a little curio cabinet in my hallway that had some figures stood up in it, and that was about it. And then about 2.5 years ago, my wife and I moved into this house that we're in now. I'd been in a small little house for about 15 years, and we got married. And when COVID hit, we both found ourselves working from home and basically on top of each other with our kid. And it's just like, we need a bigger place. So we need a place with our own offices. And so I'd bought, right before we moved, I bought a Cobra Moray because I saw one in a store. I was like, oh, I love that. I always one of my favorite vehicles. So I picked it up. And so it kind of got the juices flowing a little bit again.
Yeah.
And, but I hadn't really got into it. But then we moved into this house, and it's like, okay, here's my office now. This bedroom, this 10 by 10 bedroom is now my office. And it's like, I'm going to do some stuff with this. So bought the cabinets back here and started cleaning it out. Found a good workbench that's an old Draftsman table that I've always loved, because I had Draftsman tables when I was in school, and kind of just started going nuts on buying things. And it kind of got out of hand for a little while, for about a year. And the result of it is what you kind of see around me and behind me.
But isn't that, it's the easy thing, isn't it? Isn't it so easy to get just sucked into it and just go, yep. Buy that.
I mean, we get old enough, and we get, semi-successful in our careers, and we might have a little bit of disposable income. And yeah, I think all of us are in that same boat to some degree. And a lot of it goes to that. And if we have understanding family around us that lets us do that, seems to be a big key thing, whether they dive into it with us or not. But as long as they understand what we're trying to do and having fun with it,
yeah, definitely,
it works. And
awesome.
Yeah. And so this has been just kind of the result of the last 2.5 years.
Well, that's pretty impressive going for 2.5 years, Jeff. I've got to say, that is remarkable. I mean,
I've slowed down a lot. I really have, my collection is really at a point now where I don't need or I don't want a lot. I'm not a completist, even though on some things I am. And so, there's a few things I'd still like to get, and there's a few things I'd like to upgrade or finish out. Like with the G.I. Joe stuff, you're always chasing down little bits and pieces sometimes for all that stuff. And same with some of the Star Wars things. There's a little gun I need for a certain figure, but some of the stuff is kind of spendy, and I may never get it for a long time. Or if that's where the thrill of the hunt has morphed into the patience of the hunt to find exactly what you need and not go crazy.
So talking about things that you need as such, do you have a grail piece, the one thing that you think, yes, I really want that, and I'll pay a little bit of money for that?
Well, there's a couple things. The first one is a want, but not a visceral need.
Okay.
And that would be a USS Flag.
Okay.
I just don't have room for it anyways, even if I had it. So that's not a big deal for me. If I get one, great. If not, I actually have a line on one. If I ever wanted to go pick it up, I could. I just don't have the couple $1,000s to do that. Or I don't want to spend a couple $1,000s on that. I'd rather spend it on what I really want, which is I'd like to get an authentic vinyl Cape Jawa.
Okay.
Yeah. That's I've got the Stan Solo one. up there.
Yeah.
And it's the last figure I need to have a complete Star Wars figure vintage run.
Wow.
I've got a lot of variants, but not all of them. But I'm not going to chase down every single variant. But I have every figure except for that one.
So would that be loose? I'm guessing that's loose. You'd be happy with loose.
Yep.
My question with that is, someone could be, selling that online, or how do you know that cape isn't an original cape? That is the only problem, because you could go take it to get it graded, and they could come and say this isn't original. This is not an original cape.
That's the crux of it. It's like I don't know. That's the Wild West show that has become our collecting community and our hobby. Is like, yeah, you can do all your due diligence you want, but there's still that little bit in the back of your head of like, is this real or not? Because they've gotten so good.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, you just look at some of the stuff out there, and look at the Stan Solo stuff. And I love Stan Solo stuff. And he brands it on the back of the leg that it's not real. But if you didn't know to look for that, you wouldn't know a difference.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a couple of his figures, and I'm not ashamed to say that I've got them in my collection, because
me too. I love his stuff. I
for
think
sure.
he's doing absolutely amazing work, and I think we all do. And there's a couple comic books I'd like to get. I'd like to get a Silver Surfer #1.
Okay.
I'd like to get a first appearance of Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider's, I'm a big fan of Ghost Rider or Silver Surfer. So some comic books like that I'd love to be able to get.
Awesome.
But those at Vinyl Cape Jawa, I think I could get for around $2,000 or so. A good condition first appearance of Ghost Rider, that's $8,000 or $9,000. That kind of
thing. And that is just wow.
And Silver Surfer, you're looking at even a little bit more. So the comic book stuff overall, value-wise, blows the action figure stuff out of the water as far as where the kind of money you can spend in that hobby.
That's just phenomenal amounts of money. That it really is. It's just
I
can tell you now, if my wife found out that I've just spent $6,000 on a comic.
I mean, I've come across
for sure.
And I say that overall, but I mean, yes, there's some super spendy action figures out there. I mean, but you're looking at complete rarefied air. Whereas with comics, you can find a $5,000 comic book, locally pretty easily. And
just, you don't have the money for it.
You just don't have the money for it, right? I was just in the local comic book store today, and there's a first appearance of Spider-Gwen, Gwen Stacy's. Spider-Gwen. That book's probably 10, 12 years old, something like that. And it's graded as a 9.6, and the grading stuff in comics is a lot more important than in action figures, loose stuff.
Yeah.
And it was $1,800 comic book.
Wow.
And it's like, it's a cool book, and I'd love to have that, but I'm not paying $1,800 for it.
No, definitely. That's incredible. It's just so talking of, like, I'm gonna say money wise, but sentimental value. What is your most prized possession in your collection?
Well, probably actually my
Are you going to get you go big screen here?
This is my
This
is my very first action figure that I own, and it's a $5-10 figure, but it's the very first one I got when I was like 5 years old.
Yeah,
it's Adventure People.
Wow.
And I love the logo on the back, and just the sentimentality of this whole thing is he came with the skis, but I didn't have this. These aren't the original skis, but here's the original action figure. His head's loose, or he's sad. I don't know, one of the two. And but I've got some key figures in my Star Wars collection that I picked up a lot of stuff in the 90s to figure out.
Yeah.
Also, I was at a convention, a local Star Trek convention once, and there was a guy selling Star Wars stuff, and I picked up a blue Snaggletooth and an Amon for like $40 each, and those are kind of prized possessions of mine too now because because of what those good things have done, but also I just got lucky and found them pretty cheap.
That's fair play. I mean, if you can get them cheap, why not? I mean, the money on those is fairly expensive these
Yeah.
days. I've got to say, definitely. So, right now, I've not been doing the YouTube for long. I mean, I started getting into watching, people like Scuba Pete and
Yeah.
It's Me War and stuff like that since 2020. That's where I first saw you. I saw you in that video where you that you did with Chris on Chasing 80s Toys, which when you sent the Defiant to Pete, and I just thought, wow, that is absolutely phenomenal. I loved watching that. That was just the whole process of getting it packed, and you took everything apart and stuff like that, and there's bits that you couldn't take apart because you didn't break them. That you packaged it, you sent it off, and it was pretty much arrived on a pallet.
Yeah.
My question to you is: would you ever consider starting your own YouTube channel, or are you happy doing what you're doing?
I'm happy with Chris. I love Chris and Pete to death. They're great friends, and I don't think I would ever start my own because for one thing, I don't have the time. And the creative energy that takes, you kind of got to get up for, and you really got to put your time into that and your headspace into that. And I work in a creative job, so I have to be creative at work all day long, and then keep that energy going when I come home to produce videos. I don't see myself sustaining that. I still like to draw and paint. Sai has actually gotten me back into drawing and painting a little bit more just because showing his stuff. So seeing his stuff and talking with him a lot about it has inspired me to kind of pick up the drawing for fun mantle a little bit again. And so I've started doing that. But what we do on Chasing 80s Toys is enough for me, and it's awesome. And I'm actually the weak link of the three of us because I wouldn't
say that.
I wouldn't say that. I don't produce as much as Chris and Pete do. Those guys are great at that. And Chris is the linchpin for the three of us because he's the one that edits it all together and puts it all together. Pete and I just throw our cameras around and have fun with it and stuff. And
you do the exciting stuff like going toy hunts and
because
I saw you do the toy hunts in Vegas.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, we my wife and I went down there to Vegas and our daughter went down there for like 5 days. We go to Vegas maybe once every couple of years and and stay down there and I convinced them to let's get some content for the channel and follow me around to some of these shops and stuff. So some cool shops down there.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. Some pretty decent stuff. I mean,
but Pete's the master of the toy hunt video. He lives in like just a giant pool of stores that within a stone's throw where he lives. It's just crazy. I don't have a ton of that around here, so whenever I travel, I try to do it. But yeah, Pete's in a mecca of vintage toys.
So how did you get involved with Chris and Pete then? Because what was the story behind that?
Well, I got back into the toy stuff and I started watching some of the YouTube channels and started finding out some of the YouTube channels. I got into watching Michael Mercy stuff and then retro blasting and then analog toys and kind of then moved away from some of those guys but stuck with analog and retro blasting and the way of doing things. And then when they would do live streams and stuff, I'd be in the chat. And so got in the chats, and you guys all know how welcoming Pete is to everybody.
Definitely.
And just got talking to him in the chat. He mentioned a few times based on some of the content in the streams about how he wanted to get a Defiant. There's a local pawn shop here in town about a half hour away from me that had a whole wall of G.I. Joe stuff from a big collection they bought. And in that collection was a flag, a USS flag, the Mobile Command Center, a Mobat, a Defiant, a ton of figures and a ton of other vehicles and stuff, Rolling Thunder.
Yeah.
And the Mobile Command Center you see behind me, and I'll get that eventually, right there. And the Terror Drone that you see that's
just next to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are from that collection. So
okay.
So is the Mobat above in the case. And so I thought I might go get that flag one of these days. Well, I went back over there after about a month after the first time I saw those, and the flag was gone.
Okay.
But everything else was still there. So I eventually bought the Defiant from them and spent about 6 to 7 months filling out and getting pieces and parts that were missing. It was probably 90% complete, but some of the key stuff was missing. So I spent some time trying to put it back together. And I got it back together, and I was like, man, this thing takes up a ton of room. It's huge, just like the flag would be. I don't have room for it. And I kind of had I still have a loose criteria for my G.I. Joe collecting of 82 to 86.
Okay.
And the Defiant fell just barely out of that. But it was such a cool thing and rare.
Yeah.
And so kind of got it in my head, I might try to sell this, and I'm not sure how to go about doing that. And then in the chat, Pete was like, I'd like to get, the last big grail piece I want to get for my Joe collection is a Defiant. I was like, hey, Mr. Pete that I don't know. What about, I've got one. Would you be interested in that? That started with snowball of us chatting and talking and becoming really good friends. And I'm like, okay, I'd like to send, I want to send this to you. Is that, how do you want me to send that to you and take it apart and send it to you? He's like, yeah. He goes, oh, and by the way, I've got a friend named Chris who has a channel. We should film this and track that transition and stuff. So got on the horn with Chris and Pete at the same time, and we just started talking through the process and figuring out what to do, and we just all hit it off really well. And after that video was done, Chris came and said, hey, do you guys want to be part of Chasing 80s Toys, and do we just be content providers for it, and we can just kind of all do this together? And it's like, heck yeah. It was great.
That is awesome. Isn't it funny how you just you just get chatting to someone you've never met before, and you just speak to them on, and I mean, listen, I'm the same as you. I met Pete and Chris Miwa through Michael Mercy. So I really appreciate meeting them, and I'd come off social media for a while. And it was Pete that reached out again and said, we've got this Instagram page, come and join the Instagram group and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, I don't know, I'm not too fast. He goes, no, come on, don't have to post any pictures or anything like that. You just sit and chat.
Yeah, just hang out and chat.
Exactly. So, I started chatting, and I saw people started, they're putting their pictures, their collections. I'm thinking, what is it? I've got a collection and stuff like that. It wasn't as expansive as what it is now. But so I just got on and messaged Pete and said, look, I've got a collection. Do you want to do like a podcast or something like that? Go live once a month. He said, yeah, sure. So he's phenomenal. And Chris Miwa, again, he's probably one of the nicest guys you can meet in the toy collecting community. What a gentleman he is. And it's so nice to meet people like yourself and Chris and Pete and all the others that have actually been on this series and stuff. And it's really
amazing.
Is great.
It really is. And I totally agree. I mean, it's this community has grown on me, and it's been absolutely amazing to see. We have a very diverse likes of toy lines. I had never really been into mask. Chris is an aficionado of mask, and is a pusher of me buying mask stuff, and I never had even really heard of it. I remember the cartoon vaguely at the time, but things like that. And so there, 98% of the people in this community are absolute gems, and even the ones that aren't, they're few and far between. And because it's just like any crowd, people are going to have great people. Some people you're not going to click with. And I've yet to really actually find anybody I've never clicked with. And it's such a welcoming community and knowledgeable. Like I said, I never knew anything about Action Man or Action Force or anything like that until I got into this community. And it's been amazing. It's expanded my friendship group, who I talk to and do things with.
Absolutely.
It's been amazing. And my wife is like, I went to Joe Fest last year, met Pete in person for the first time, and we hung out a ton, hung out with a lot of people there. Met Michael and Tony from Retro Blasting and Analog, hung out with them a bunch. We have chats going all the time, and planning on going back to Joe Fest again this next year, and we're already planning that. And so I've even got my wife was like, I want to go with you and meet your friends. It's like, yeah. Okay. So she's going.
Well, we've got Echo Live coming up in next month. I think it's the 4th of February. So I'm going to get to meet people like Luke Reynolds. I'm going to meet Cy Man Fandanga. I'm going to meet him. There's Bosk's Bounty. Hopefully Nick will be there from Only One Kenobi. So get to see these guys. And if I've missed a name, I'm sorry. I don't know who's going and who's not going. But yeah.
But
and
that's
then
what
Scuba's
it-
coming
that's
over in Easter time for celebration, so I'm going to get to meet him as well.
I
which
looked
I'm
into coming.
super excited
I
for.
looked into coming over with him on that, and I just couldn't swing it. But I'm totally
Ah.
envious with him getting to come over. But that's the other big thing about this community is the international aspect of it. You know, Chris is
Yeah.
in the Netherlands, Tony's
Yeah.
in Australia. A couple other guys that are in Australia, Brandon Haley, and just Keith Knight over. You know, the English group. Getting to know you guys over here has been phenomenally cool, and that's been a huge big part of it too for me is getting to know everybody, but also the international side of it and getting everyone's
definitely
stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm in. Listen, I was quite nervous about like getting involved with this. Not so much getting involved in the community. I think more so like getting onto YouTube, starting up a channel, and speaking to people like yourself.
Yeah, I know.
But listen, I'm overwhelmed that I've got to. I mean, you're episode 26, so I'm overwhelmed and grateful that I've got this far. And then I worked out the other day that I've asked all these people, and then I sort of like worked out as to when it's like I've booked up to January next year, and it's halfway through.
Are you really? Wow.
January. Yeah. So I mean, I've had to stop inviting people and just say, look, I'm really sorry. I've got to stop inviting people. I've got so many people I've got to get through. That's if everybody wants to do it, of course. Because I mean, when was it I asked you? I mean, I asked you well before Christmas.
Yeah, it's been a couple months.
It's crazy, yeah. I've got to stop doing that, so I've just stopped asking people
I appreciate
and inviting
it.
people for the time being. But
it's so much fun. I love doing these streams like this. There's
oh yeah, no, it's great. I love it. And listen, I just like talking about like collecting. I like listening to people's stories. It's just remarkable.
Yeah.
So back to you. What is your main focus in your collection with what you collect? Are you predominantly more G.I. Joe collecting now than Star Wars, or do you sort of swing between both of them?
It's been kind of half and half. I'm swinging back, but at first, and then it really became G.I. Joe. But now the Joe stuff is kind of a point where I don't really need much Joe stuff.
Yeah.
And when I say need, of course, it means want. There's a few little figures, pieces I'm always keep an eye out for, and there's also a few little like battle station things I'm trying to find, little things like that. But as far as big vehicles and major figures, I'm pretty well set. I've got a complete set of 82 through 86 figure wise now.
Okay.
And, I think I'm missing one or two here and there, but nothing major, a lot of variants. But so I'm kind of swinging back towards Star Wars now. And
okay.
And mostly, and even that though, I don't have a ton I want to get. I have this sickness of army building certain figures for Star Wars, which is
I have noticed.
absolutely just asinine. But I army build, of course, what everyone else does too, which is the Imperial trooper figures, stormtroopers. But I also, Death Star gunners and but also like Tusken Raiders, and I've been army building X-wing Lukes to get like a whole cadre of X-wing figures of pilots. But also there's a lot of things like the little mini rigs. I want to try to finish out my mini rig collection. But honestly, I've really slowed down in the last few months. And I'm just kind of being a little bit more opportunistic when I see it, but I'm not doing a ton of hunting right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it predominantly vintage G.I. Joe and vintage Star Wars that you're after?
Yep.
You wouldn't be interested in, say, like, for example, getting the new G.I. Joe classified line?
I used to. I did.
Yeah.
I was into the classified stuff in the Black Series things for Star Wars for a while. I still have a small shelf of all those up here. And I ended up selling, and I've got a few things to sell still of my classified figures, but I really had to focus. I'm really hemmed in by a couple things. Budget, of course.
Yeah.
And also the size here.
Yeah.
And then also I don't want to get into the way I was in the 90s where I'm chasing the corporate side of things, where I'm trying to track releases and exclusives and trying to go to Target or Walmart at certain days and times. I just don't want to get back into that. I love that scale of figure. The Valaverse stuff, Tony's figure, Desert Rat, I absolutely love those. And I've got a little bit of trooper building stuff I've done with the Black Series here, the Shore Trooper and the Tank Trooper and stuff. And I love the details and I love the figures themselves, but I just don't see myself going too far with those. and it's just more of a. I don't keep them in the boxes. If I get
Yeah.
them, I do them for display and get them out for fun. So I don't see myself really collecting those very much.
No, that's fair enough. I mean, I started collecting the classifieds, and I was like, oh god, and then it was like,
Yeah,
you know, I started off trying to get everything, and I was like, oh, do you know what? A lot of these figures, they don't look that great, so I'm just going to ease back on the GI Joe classifieds. Then they decided to do the 6-inch retro carded figures with Gung Ho. But I just thought, oh, for the love of God, take my money.
Yeah,
because they're the figures that I remember as a kid, and they're in 6-inch form, and they've got the card to go with it. And you know, and I've said in my videos before, I think the Action Force and the Valaverse line, or Valaverse and the Action Force line coming out, was the major kick up the arse Hasbro needed for their classified series, because they've improved a hell of a lot since.
Yeah, you know, ever since Zartan came out for classified, they've kind of changed that line around and really gotten back to. But I also have a hard time with corporations that don't innovate and do new things, and they're just trading on the nostalgia of the old stuff. And and it's like, come on, guys, find something new and put your own spin on it versus just I'm going to make a new. And they're great figures. I think they're really cool. And like I said, I have some. I've got the Timber and Snake Eyes and the Breaker and the you know, not Breaker, but the Ram Cycle and that kind of stuff. But I just, and I know it's hard to come up with new intellectual properties that really click with people where you can go full force with this stuff. But I don't know. This nostalgia wave has, and we all collect for nostalgic reasons. I mean, that's the thing. We all collect for nostalgic reasons. That's what drives almost all of us for this stuff. But that has kind of started leaving a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth. That's why I've pulled back a little bit. It's
not just GI Joe they've done it on. It's Star Wars. You know, GI Joe. It's He-Man Origins. It's Transformers. These things have been going since the 80s, and they're still going strong. And it's because people are wanting to buy them. Now, listen, I know a lot of other people. When that classified line first came out, there was so much uproar because that's not the Duke we know. That's not Roadblock. That's not Scarlet and stuff like that. You know, and a lot of you know, discontent with the line, so to speak. So even if they do, these corporations try. Listen, I'm not sticking up for them. I'm trying to sit on the fence here. But you know, if they do something different, you're going to get those that are going to be like in for the nostalgia, and they know this isn't it and stuff like that, and that's not what we want. And do you know what I mean? So
I totally get that.
I can't please everybody, can they?
And it's fun, you know. And people are going to say, well, they can't win for losing, sort of thing. And it just doesn't speak to me like the emotional tie that I have to the vintage stuff. And people that collect the newer stuff, I love. I mean, like what Shabby does with his stuff, the Black Series things he's collecting is just absolutely. And when I look at a lot of those things, they're amazing. I mean, the Valaverse stuff is absolutely awesome. They have a comic book line that goes with it too that just totally speaks to what I love. And I love the classified series of what they're doing now. I mean, those figures are really cool. They're
looking good.
They're looking great. And the Black Series stuff is, like I said, the details are just amazing. And I don't know, they just don't speak to me as much as the vintage stuff when I was a kid.
But look at it like this. Don't you think it's testament to people from the 80s that come up with these properties that they're still going strong and people are still wanting to collect them? And I guess it's pretty much like the Turtles as well. I'm struggling to think now of a toy line released in this, like, since 2020 or 2020, like in the 2000s and stuff like that, that will still be collected in 40 years time. I'm struggling to think.
Do you think Fortnite will be collectible stuff from then, or all the figures from Eternals or Batman movies or things like that? Will those be really big collectibles? I mean, look at what the Power of the Force stuff from the 90s is doing right now. You can't give that stuff away sometimes as far as value goes. But there are going to be people that have nostalgia to those where eventually those things will be collectible stuff and you'll have a market for that. I just think about what we're going to do with our stuff in 20 years, you know, with the plastics the way they are and the degrading and things like that. And it's just, we are in a 20 to 30 year period now of collecting. At our age, we will start aging out eventually. our collections will be, who knows what's going to happen with them. You know, like for me, I don't have a family member that gives a crap about this stuff, and they all think I'm kind of nuts for doing this, and in a good way. But you know, what's going to happen to your collections when we get older? And you know, I've got a buddy of mine. We talked about this the other day. As far as our comic book goes, he goes, when I get about 65 or 70, I'm going to sell all my comic books and use that for retirement, or 60 years old or so. And it's like, that's not a bad idea, because he's like me. He's like, I don't have anybody that wants my collection, and I don't want it to go to waste, basically. So what do you do with your stuff? I mean, yes, right now it feels an emotional need, but long term, what's going to happen to all this stuff?
That is a very good question.
Yeah,
that is a very good question. And do you know what? I don't want to. I want to cross that bridge when I come to it. I don't want to think about. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm looking at these figures here, and these are Star Wars vintage figures from the 1970s and 80s.
Yeah,
and they look absolutely fantastic still.
Yep, and they may last 50 years.
Yeah.
Yep, and it depends on how we treat them and take care of them.
Yeah, exactly. But then you look at some of this stuff, which again looks absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
we all know it's a different kind of plastic,
right?
You know, how, like you say, how is that going to hold up in 40
you
years
look
time?
At like from NECA and things like that, and you're like, this plastic is in 10 years, what's this plastic going to be like? Is it going to outgas and degrade and weep and become where you can't even touch it without getting sticky? And
can you imagine waking up one morning and you walk into your collection room and you've just got a pile of melted plastic?
That's the nightmare, isn't it?
Just decomposed and stuff like that. You know what?
Yeah. So I work from home every day, and almost every day, and so I spend a lot of time in this room. So I've been thinking about that a lot, you know, and just the chemistry of preservation and the plastics, the way things happen, and then also, you know, how do museums do it? You know, you watch a lot of things on, you know, go to like Adam Savage's Tested YouTube channel, and he does a lot of talks with people from the Smithsonian, and they talk about plastics and stuff and that outgassing and how do they stabilize things. And you kind of got to have that inkling in your head a little bit. I mean, you don't have to go to museum quality, I would imagine, for this stuff, but
yeah,
it's in the same realm. And it's like, you know, like right now I've got stuff that's in a cabinet. It's not sealed, but it's, you know, kind of humidity controlled and lighting controlled. Whereas these, I don't have the cabinets for it. So they're just out in the middle of nowhere. It's like, you know, they're going to get dust on them and that kind of stuff. And, you know, if things sit like that for 10 years, what's going to happen to them?
Are you telling me you don't dust your collection, Jeff?
Well, I do dust the question, but not as much as I should, because it's a pain in the butt.
And I think that's everybody's worst nightmare, isn't it? Collections, dusting.
Yep.
Well, I've got 3 more questions for you.
Sure.
So if you could only collect one toy line as an adult, what would it be and why?
Ooh. It would probably be vintage Star Wars, because that was the first love, and that still gives me the most emotional satisfaction. I go back to I was a big Top Gear fan, and James May talks about a car that gives you the fizz when you look at it, and it's like that's just awesome. And I still get that with Star Wars. I mean, even to the point of the smell of a Star Wars figure just evokes things, memories, and I'd stick with that one.
Awesome. Well, I am surprised by that, because I thought you might have been swayed to the G.I. Joe just for the sheer scale of
it's back and forth. Like I said, these two are very much both close to the heart because of the comic stuff too. Because I've got a complete run of the G.I. Joe comic books, and I've had most of them since I was a kid, and bought them when they came out, and so that's the tie-in for me for G.I. Joe too. So that's a tough question.
I've got to say, that's one thing I used to love doing in the 80s, was going around my friend's house, reading this week's comic, seeing the mission, and then once you've read it, you just go and play, and it was happy times.
They knew what they were doing.
Damn right. So, last 2 questions then. What gives you that toy collecting buzz?
Sitting here and stewing in the collection, just hanging out and looking around. But also, I get a little nerdy as far as the organization goes and the cataloging and trying to figure out, oh, I don't have this little piece. I need to find this piece. And of course, the hunting part is a big thing. I don't have a lot of stores around here where I can go hunting. And so when I travel, I try to hit a few places if I can. If the family time allows it and stuff. But I love just organizing the room. That
Do you
yeah.
Do you prefer actually going on a physical toy hunt, or do you just browse the internet and go, yeah, I get that?
Both. I would prefer to go on a physical one. And just there's nothing better than walking in and having that smell of a toy store or a comic book store hit you in the face, or a bookstore. I also collect first edition books, and so that smell is just absolutely amazing to me. And I would much rather be in a store hunting. I really got into, and a lot of the G.I. Joe collection comes from the Whatnot app. I don't think you guys have that over in the UK. It's a online streaming auction site, where guys basically get in and do like a YouTube live stream, but then they auction figures at 30 seconds a piece or a minute a piece. And you can, hence the explosion of the collection in the last couple of years has been, a lot of it has become as that Whatnot app, where you just sit at night and you're like, buy. And but I would much rather find a collection in the wild and go find it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, likewise. I mean, I say I've not seen that many shops or stores that do those kind of vintage stuff, but I know there are some in the UK. I've just not found them yet. So maybe when I get
time, stores around here that have some places that you can you check the little cubby holes every once in a while, and you might come across stuff. And in fact, I might go do that tomorrow and just kind of check a few things. And I love going to the comic book store. I'm good friends with the owner of my local comic book store, and so I love going over there and just hanging out and stuff too.
Isn't that good that you become a regular and you get to know the guys that run the place and stuff like that? Yeah. And I think that's so cool.
It's huge.
Really is. That is awesome. Absolutely awesome.
Very much so.
Right. Last question then, Jeff.
Okay.
What does your collection mean to you?
Ooh. That's a good question. It's comfort. It's like comfort food. It's like eating something with gravy on it. I mean, it's just it's a bit of a getaway to come in here and just hang out. And it's like a warm blanket you wrap around you. I love showing people when they come to the house and they walk in, they're going, what in the world is this? And just talking about it. And it also means the community and you guys and everybody that's going to watch this and everyone that we do things with has become such an important part of my life and my day-to-day stuff, and the chats that I'm part of, and the calls that we all do. And it's a huge part. And it's such a different aspect of the collection of collecting that I never thought was there. And to discover that has been a major impetus for keeping me into it as much as I am right now.
Awesome. I agree with absolutely everything you say. Everything you've said, I feel exactly the same way about it. It's, I can come and sit in here if I've had a crap day at work. I just come and sit in here. I can look around and think, I'm loving this. And even if I'm here for 2 minutes, it just chills me out. It relaxes me. I'm home.
Get into the restoring a little bit, and fixing things. And it's so much fun.
Well, I the last thing I restored was the Action Force whale. I'm actually going to be starting a new project real soon. I've just got myself something I'm waiting for to come through the mail, so I'll be starting a new restoration project.
I restored this Terradrome this last summer.
Oh, okay.
And that was a chore, taking it apart, finding the parts for it, and cleaning everything, taking everything outside and de-yellowing it and put it all together. And it was so much fun to do. And it was, I never thought I'd own a Terradrome. I never really wanted a Terradrome, but now it's like awesome. Yeah.
So when you de-yellowed it, you say you took it outside?
Yep. I don't have the blue or the UV lights here.
Oh, okay. I thought you took it outside because of the smell. Yeah, because of the
So I've had
to get the blue light because we haven't got the blinking sun. So
so during the summer here in Idaho, it gets 95 degrees Fahrenheit, and bright sunny days for weeks on end, and so you get the cream hair gel cream. I can't remember what it's called. Down here someplace. And yeah, peroxide. This stuff works perfect on that. So just slather that on, put some saran wrap on it so it keeps it all on from drying out, and leave that out in the sun. Leaving the panels, taking the panels off, and was just leaving those out in the sun for half hour, 45 minutes would just zap that yellow out, especially when it was almost 100 degrees out. And it brought this thing back. It was so yellow. It brought it back like brand new.
Is it just the whites you put in there, or is it the colors as well?
No, in fact, the blue panels, I did those too. Wow. They were different colors, different blues from each other. Some were darker than others. And obviously that yellow and blue had turned into almost a little bit of a greenish, dark greenish color. But putting those on there and doing the same thing with them and putting them in the peroxide, those I would just put in liquid peroxide. But those work great.
So do you add water as well, or do you just use peroxide?
I just use peroxide. I get a 3% peroxide. I don't leave them in there very long. I leave them in there, once it's direct sunlight and it's really hot out, I'll put them in there for like an hour and a half, and they're great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
Jeff, my friend, unfortunately, that has come to the end of the chat. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I've absolutely loved chatting to you, my man. And
you too. This is awesome.
This has been brilliant. Where can people find you on social media? What platforms are you on?
I don't do a ton of social media. I do my Instagram account. It's at Broken Barker. And then of course you can find me through Chasing 80s Toys on the YouTube channel stuff with Pete and Chris.
Okay. Now I say it every week. I will put your links in the description below, and every week I post the bloody video and then think, shit, I've got to go back and I've got to edit it and I've got to put the links in. So
don't worry about it.
Before I put this up on the video, up on the platform on YouTube, I will add your link. So I'll put your Instagram one on there, and I'll put the Chasing 80s Toys link on there as well. So once again, Jeff, thank you so much. It's just been absolutely amazing talking to you.
Very much
Love chatting to you, my friend. And I just want to say to everybody watching, thank you so much for watching. Always appreciate your support. And we shall see you in the next one. Take care for now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.